Good morning, guys. Well, good afternoon, or even could be good evening. It obviously depends on when you are catching the latest video from Glasgow Rangers Nation. I'm Owen James. This is your channel. This is your fan-driven Rangers channel, guys. We're here to bring you all the latest right throughout this off-season, right into obviously pre-season and the Champions League qualifiers, and on top of all that, obviously, through the season. The best way to make sure you never miss out on the content, which is free. We don't charge you for it. We don't ask you for a donation every month. We don't ask you for an amount to watch your content. You just have to obviously click the like, subscribe, obviously, ring the bell. If you do want to give some money, you can become a member for as little as 99p or hit the super thanks button. It always does help, especially as we've got to pay for this new laptop soon. And I keep using this phone to do these videos. It's much better when we can have with the laptop and we can have obviously the thumbnails and the videos and everything else, which is much better. However, look, we're going to talk Max Aarons. We're going to talk Robin Proper on the verge of departure. We'll talk about how that may come about and why that may come about. We're going to talk, obviously, next. Who's next? What's next? How do we go? Where do we go from here? We're going to talk, obviously, as well about Cyriel Dessers. He could be subject of 2 clubs interested in him now. Just get the man out. Right, let's start off by talking about the big news, obviously, which was the final official confirmation of the arrival of Max Aarons at Rangers. Officially signed, obviously. You've seen the scarf pics. You've seen the pics in the club kit. He's done the Rangers TV interview. He's done all the, the things you need to tick off, don't you? Sign the contract, do the scarf, wear the shirt, talk to the girl from Rangers TV about obviously about joining the club and say all the right things. We've done all those. We've ticked them all off. Well done, Max. You've ticked them all off. Now the hard work starts, mate, doesn't it? Now you've got to get yourself fully fit. You said you're fit. You said you've been training on your holiday, which is very admirable. But now you've got yourself match fit. You've got to get yourself game fit. You've got to go out there and show your moves, man, on the training park. But no, look, nice to hear from Max Aarons. I've just watched the interview. Home from work, guys, recording this video. It's just coming up for midnight here in the Midlands. Just finished work, obviously not so long ago. But look, it was nice to hear from him. Nice to hear what he had to say. Obviously, he talked about the fact that, there was never any doubt when he knew that Rangers were interested, what a massive club Rangers are. He talked also, rather interestingly, about something that I think is always a concern about players who come to Ibrox, which is the pressure, the big club atmosphere and the pressure. And, no matter what is said around Scotland by other clubs, Rangers are a massive, massive European club. And obviously coming here carries its own set of pressures. We know that the fan base, us, we are very, very demanding of our players. We want our players to be the best. We want our players to run through brick walls for the shirt. We want our players to die for the badge. There's been so many sayings over the years, hasn't there? You're only as good as your last match. Well, it was said at Rangers, you're only as good as your last pass. I think that was one of Richard Goff's. Barry Ferguson, I think, once said, you've got 10 minutes, go out there and impress us. Someone came off at half time and the fans were booing and it was a draw. I'm like, why are people booing us? So the new signing asked, and the club captain says, because we're not winning. The expectations are very high, and Max Aarons obviously, realises that, because he talked about the fact that, he felt that obviously the expectation, the pressure, with playing for a big club like Rangers would actually suit him. He said that he felt that he was at his best when he was under pressure, when he felt the weight on his shoulders. That's when he felt he played his best football. Now, Max, you're going to get that in abundance, mate, here. You are going to get a lot of pressure. So, be ready for that. And look, it's nice to hear him talk like that. And I think, look, if he goes out, and I know words are a fine thing. Words are, everyone can say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be this, I'm going to be that. But you know what? Actions speak louder than words, and go out there on the pitch and show you can do it. And I think obviously that when we'll see the true test of that statement. But it's nice to see, hear from a player who has that expectancy and has that belief in himself to handle the pressure, and knows the pressure's coming and wants to thrive on that pressure. Because I think for a long time now, we've had a lot of players who've shrunk under the pressure, who've hidden from the pressure, who can't handle it and have let the club down. And I think it's nice to hear Max Aarons talk about that. This is an exciting signing. Don't get me wrong. Yes, it's a loan move. I'd much prefer it to be a permanent transfer. Of course I would. He's a young lad. He's a good footballer. Ex-England '21 international. Came up through the youth system at Norwich. He talked also about another one of the big reasons, other than the big club, for joining Rangers was Russell Martin and obviously Matt Gill. And he talked about the fact that when he was going through the system at Norwich and he broke into the first team at Norwich, how the influence that Russell Martin had and the influence that Matt Gill had on him were massive, and that was one of the reasons why he wanted to join Rangers. So, showing that Russell Martin does have some pulling power when it comes to bringing players to the club, and that's a positive. That's a huge positive for Rangers. But this is an exciting signing. Obviously, he talked about the play. In fact, he knew some of the players at the club. Some of those players he did name. There are question marks over their future at Rangers. Kieran Dow, Robbie Matondo. He says he knows Dujon Sterling. Obviously knows. He said, obviously I know Tav through obviously playing with his brother. That's right. James Tavernier has a brother. Those of you who don't know, centre forward, plays for Bournemouth. Hell of a lot better player than Tav. But yeah, so look, at the end of the day, I think his name is Marcus Tavernier. Much better footballer than James Tavernier. But, it was good to hear, obviously, he has a relationship with some of the players. He talked about his anxiousness to get down to work. And look, like I said, this is an interesting signing, an exciting signing. And people, have talked about what this may mean for Rangers going forward in terms of formation, in terms of shape, in terms of the way we play. It's interesting. People have talked about Tav moving to centre-back with Max Aarons coming in to play right-back. I think the fact that Aarons is coming in on loan from a Premier League club, this is not a loan move to sit Aarons on the... Well, hopefully, this is not a loan move to sit Aarons on the bench behind Tav. Aarons is the better player. Aarons is, a Premier League footballer. He is a player who has played at the highest level. This is a player who has, done what he's done in English football, which, whether we like it or not, is a higher standard. So, this is a player who has to play over James Tavernier. And now people have talked about Tav moving to centre-back, which I think is just... It actually makes me laugh when people say that, because statistically, this is according to statistics. This is not me hating on Tav, but statistically, aerially, he is average to below average in terms of his statistics, in terms of his percentile. I think he's 52nd percentile, about average. One-on-ones and being dribbled past, again, he is in the lower half for those within the SPL. Positioning also rates within the lower half in the SPL. These are statistics produced by Football Ref, FB Ref, which is a football reference website, which produces all the stats. It does all the stats for all the sports around the world. So it's a major site that does a lot of stats and facts and things like that. And Tav's rated in the lower percentile for a lot of the areas that you need to be good at to be a centre back: positioning, aerial ability, one-on-one ability, stopping people dribbling around you. If Tav is poor in the air, why would you play him centre-back? It makes zero sense. And some of his worst games were at centre-back last season. I don't prescribe to the best games at centre-back. I think he was genuinely shit at centre-back. His positioning was awful. So, I think that's just a fallacy. The argument that I'm hearing that he's going to be a squad player this season, that he's going to be a backup, I think is a better argument and a better use of James Tavernier. Look, Tav's in a very interesting position now with Max Aarons here. He's obviously got genuine competition here if Aarons can stay fit. Tav, I think, if I was James Tavernier, I would be sitting down and having a long, hard think about my legacy here. If you go back to the Europa League final and the seasons leading up to the Europa League final, if James Tavernier had left after that Europa League final, I don't think you'd find a single Rangers fan criticising him at all, even me, for what he had achieved at the club. However, he overstayed his welcome, and to quote the old saying from Batman, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. And James Tavernier has certainly lived long enough to become the villain. He's overstayed his welcome. He's got to the point where he's become stale. He's gone backwards, and he's ruining his legacy, and he's tarnishing his legacy. If you go back, I supported Tav. I didn't criticise him. I liked Tav. I defended him. But then last few seasons, he's really gone backwards massively. So Max Aarons arriving for me is a very exciting move. I think it's a great move for the club. I think this is a top signing. He's fast going forward. He's good at defending. He's aggressive. He's positive. It's a positive right back. He can invert as well, like Martin likes. I think this is a very, very good move for Rangers. Obviously, the talk now is who's next. And we'll come on to that a bit later in the video. Right, let's talk about Robin Proper. Now, Robin Proper obviously has returned to pre-season training with Rangers. We've seen the videos and the pictures. However, the head coach of FC Twente in the Netherlands and the sporting director of FC Twente have both been having their say on Robin Proper. I think reading between the lines, this is you need to make your mind up and you need to do it now. That's what they're saying. Oosting, who is the head coach, has said that he wants he wants Proper back at 20, that he sees that Proper has a big future back at the club. He believes that he can come back in and excel, he can come back in and be the leader that he was before he left. The sporting director of FC Twente has said that Rangers and Twente have agreed a fee of £1.5 million for the player, but the ball is now in the player's court. Now, this would tie up with what was reported before Rangers returned for pre-season, was that Proper wanted to discuss his future with Russell Martin. He hadn't yet had a chance to meet with the new manager as regards his future, as regards, how both Proper and Martin saw their future, saw Proper's future and his own future at the club. So Proper, it looks like there is a fee in place. It's now down to him to make his mind up whether he wants to stay and fight for his place at Rangers and try and improve on last season, where he was pretty poor, or whether he wants to go back home to the Eredivisie, where he will probably be much more at home. Personally speaking, nothing against Proper. He's a nice enough lad and everything like that, but he's just not suited to Scottish football. Now, yes, he looks good in Europe, but you can't just keep a player just to play in Europe. Also, you need to start thinking about forming a centre-back partnership that lasts. If you look at the good teams or the great teams of the past that have won things in England or in Scotland, you've kept the same centre-back pairing. You haven't really messed the centre-back pairing around a lot, have you? You've kept a consistency there. So for me, you don't chop and change. You don't have a centre-back pairing for the SPL and a centre-back pairing for Europe. That just doesn't work. It's unsettling for the defence. It's unsettling for the goalkeeper, whoever that may be. So people build up understanding as well, a partnership as well. So that's another thing. So look, for me, Proper has kind of reached the end of his time at Rangers. Nothing against him. Like I said, he's a nice enough guy. He just is very poor in Scotland. And because the majority of his football is going to be played in Scotland, Rangers need to move on. He's not very good with the physicality of Scottish football. He's not very good with the aerial. He's not very good with the aggression. He's not very good with the speed. Whereas in Europe, where he gets more speed, more time to play with the ball, less aggression, less aerial football, he copes a lot better because it's like the Eredivisie. So for me, he's a bit sort of the Sam Lammers of defenders. He needs to head back to Twente, where he will be more at home. And I think that's better for him. That's better for the club. Now, yes, that is under what we paid for him, but sometimes you do have to cut your losses. And as I've said on multiple videos now, people have talked about, you want to sell Dessers. There's a lot more players I'd want rid of Dessers before Dessers. Yes, but unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And some of these players are so bad that you've got to take a cut price fee for them, because they just genuinely, you will not get your money back on them. You're not going to get... if, for example, we sold Danilo now, you're not going to get 6 million back on him. Nothing against him. He's just never been fit and never proved himself. Matondo, you're not going to get the money back on him. There are a few that you would possibly get the money back on, but look, on the vast majority of them, you're not going to get your money back because they're just not good enough. And that's the thing we've got to kind of understand. And I think, if it is that this fee is in place, which it looks like it is from what the sporting director of FC Twente is saying, you've just got to hope that kind of it is put across to Proper that this is the time to move on. This is the time to kind of head back to the Netherlands, cut your losses, and become, go back and be the player and the captain you can be at Twente. Go back and be that person rather than the person who struggles week in, week out in the SPL. So look, that's my take on it, and I'd love to get your take on it, guys. Let me know your thinking in the comments. Right, let's move on. Cyriel Dessers. So the Ajax Athens situation, where are we up to with that? So according to multiple media reports, the Ajax Athens transfer deal has kind of broken down a little bit, okay? Because of the fact that they're only willing to pay a certain amount, and we want a bit more than that. And we're not prepared to move. And unlike the past, where we would have probably caved in and given in and let them have a player for a bargain knockdown fee, Rangers are not working like that anymore. The 49ers very switched on, very financially sound. I think probably with Andrew Kavanagh's backing here. Very much a case of, this is our fee, we ain't budging from it. You're not going to pay the money, you can go and do one, which is admirable, very admirable. I mean, personally, I would take the money and run. But it now emerges that Feyenoord may well be interested in bringing Dessers back to Rotterdam. He has played previously for Feyenoord. Now, this is the case. Feyenoord are a lot cash richer club than Ajax. You're more likely to be able to get a deal out of them. And also the fact that, if you've got two clubs going against each other, you may even push Ajax's hand a little bit and think, well, we really want this player in Athens. Let's go and get him. We need to bid the money now. We need to pay what Rangers want. So it's positive from that aspect. And I really hope that the deal gets tied up ASAP for one of him, because for one of those two teams to take Dessers away from us, as I said yesterday on the video, he doesn't fit Martin's system. I think that it's best for him. It's best for the club. I just don't think he's very good. But I think also, we're not going to get another new striker in until he's gone. And, that's always a concern. I think some fans will even use that against him. We could have had Turgeman, we could have had Freegan, we could have had Shankland, we could have had this player. If you just cleared off Cyriel, now we're stuck with you. Great. I think the time comes, like I said, the start of the video, with the Tavernier example, you either die a hero or live long enough to become the villain. Don't be the villain, Cyriel. Don't be the villain. Right, let's finish off with what's next. Who's next? Obviously, we know Connor Cody is reportedly very close. That one, I think, may well be the next deal through the door before the Champions League game against Panathinaikos. Other than that, the Poku deal, obviously, like I said, has broken down. There's a lot of media talk around Shankland. I still don't think there's a lot in it. I think, yes, there has been a change of sporting director and a change of recruitment team now. So there may be a different attitude. I don't ever think Shankland was ever on Coppen's radar or on Clement's radar or any of those guys. So I still think that's kind of a bit of a media clickbait one, because they know Rangers fans will click on that because it's Shankland to Rangers, and that's always a very popular one. I mean, personally, I would take him over Dessers every day and twice on a Sunday. But, I think the next move after Cody has to be for a winger or a striker. That is where the need is. Who that is, I don't know at this moment in time. I'm sure there's obviously that we got Poku's gone now. I'm hoping that there's a plan B, that there's someone to kind of back that up. Now, if the 49ers are running their scouting operation anything like they run their draft board in the NFL, or their free agent scouting in the NFL, they will have target 1, target 2, target 3, target 4, target 5, target 6. There will be a list of targets. It won't be just one player. Oh shit, he isn't coming quick. We'll have that one. Like I think there was last season with Proper, for example. So, look, I think, there will be, I think, like I said, Cody, I think, is the strongest bet to be next. Personally, really like that one. Other than that, I think it's got to be a winger or a striker. That's the priority. And a right winger has to be a priority, because for me, that is the weakest area of the team. The depth chart at the moment would require, I think, Cortez to go play there, or even Bayrami to go play there, because McCausland and Dowell, does that fill you with confidence? Matondo, does that fill you with confidence? Certainly doesn't me. So, look, that's where I think we should go next. Guys, I'd love to know your thoughts on the Max Aaron signing, on who's next, on who's leaving. Thank you for watching Glasgow Rangers Nation, guys. And as always, if you've enjoyed the content, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. We are the people.